And here we are. It is the REI Rock Summit Black Friday 2022 edition. Angel, how are you doing today?
We're doing all right. Wi-Fi is a little choppy, but other than that, we're here and we're really excited to be going over this next installment of REI Rocks.
Awesome, awesome. So Thanksgiving was really cool. Did you get your bird on at all?
Um, we had a field roast. We went meatless.
Oh, okay, far out. And how'd that work out for you, Jason? Was that is it going to be the same thing next year?
There's a good chance. It wasn't bad.
Mhm.
It's
Good
not bad
stuff.
for like once a year.
Far out.
I
Okay,
think it's
so
better than
so
turkey though.
it's better than turkey. Okay, far out, far out. So I'm looking through the Spring Summit 2022. That's Jason said that's where this video is, and I'm having some trouble here. But Angel, while I keep looking, do you want to give some background as far as what Dugan was going over and how it's going to help people in the audience?
Absolutely. So what he presented on was basically syndication 101. He talked a little bit about the different scenarios and said we use 506B or 506C. And he also talked a little bit about some of the other, I guess, broader topics when getting into a syndication, like what it is trying
Uh-oh.
to, the kind of people that you need on your team. So those kinds of things.
Hmm. Hmm. Awesome, awesome. So yeah, Jason was saying that was spring 2021. Is that right, Angel? Because I'm looking through here and I'm having troubles. We might
It's
have to stand on our feet.
2022. Yeah, and it was alive,
2022.
so I don't know. I was looking and I don't see the live
Ah,
parts.
right, right. Okay, so maybe that's what's going on. I wonder if we have it somewhere else then. Okay, so as far as other people who like, have we discussed the basics of syndication in these summits before? Are there other speakers who went over similar content? Because yeah, I'm coming up blank here.
I mean, everybody
Let's see.
goes over.
You said everybody goes over, and then it sounds like it cut off.
Everybody goes over. Yeah, everybody goes over it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
um,
So.
Dan Hanford actually went over something pretty similar, and that would have been
Uh-huh.
in fall of 2020,
Okay, fall of
like
2020.
investors. But when it comes to the investors piece of it, he talked about it like the 506B versus the 506C. So that's definitely
Mm-hmm.
there as well.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to grab that one, and I think we're going to review it. Now, one thing that you and the audience are going to need to
Okay.
know is, in general, what we do here is we review the summit material, and to make it a little bit different, we play it back at 1.5 times speed to basically show you how to get the most benefit out of pre-recorded material. And one of the things that I really like about what we have on the go here and with the summits in general is it's not the same as a lot of other coaching programs and things like that, because I find that they try to, put a happy face on everything, even when it's not really presenting it fairly. Like commercial real estate is a competitive industry, so the fact that there are other people out there trying to eat your lunch, I do think it's important to really be more transparent than that. Uh, does somebody have some sort of remarks off of that? We're
I think
losing it
we
out
might
here.
have lost Angel.
Hmm. Hmm.
No,
Okay,
I'm
so if
trying to
it's
look for the video. I think I might know where a version is. Just the internet is spotty here, so I'm having a hard time logging in. So
Okay, because and I'm going through these, and I was thinking about who else we could review. Like one of the ones that I think is a really great person to review would be Joe Fairless, if it's all the same to you. I got Angel coming back. How does that sound to you, Jason? If we do that one instead, if you can't find it.
that would be good. That was a short one, I believe. And that was a interview with Angel and Joe. I think we're going to go over Joe's interview, Angel.
Yeah, it's almost 30 minutes, 29 minutes and 53 seconds, which I think is a good amount of time for this on this Black Friday 2022. So, Angel, you cool with that too? Yeah, all right, cool.
Okay.
So, we'll rock and roll. So, I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to share the Chrome tab and the audio because that's important. And then it's going to be this one right here. That's the one. Sherry. Here we go. Rock and roll. And I'll change it to 1.5 times playback speed. That might be a little bit challenging for you if you're not used to it. Personally, I watch all of my videos exclusively at 2 times speed. That's particularly important if you're ever going to be a podcaster or a live streamer. It's really common for people to hate the sound of their own voice when it's recorded. And it's pretty amazing how if it's at 2 times speed, everybody is way less annoying. But let's make this happen. Rock and roll.
Oh, yeah, it's so it's like a blue that fades into purple because we wanted to try something new, and I get to do kind of whatever I want now that I don't have a W-2.
Nice.
So yeah, it's pretty awesome, I think. All right, so Joe is here for 30 minutes of basically ask him anything. So questions, and I'm running live on Facebook, and then we've got questions here too, or in this chat as well. And I know I had a couple of friends that said I'm getting on because I have questions, and I don't see them on yet. But I know that Jason and I had a question because we're working on the episodes and the summits, and we look at your following and we're like, man, that's our aspiration, right? And we look at Dan's following, we're like, those are huge aspirations, but how long does it take to get there?
How long does it take to get there? Well, I guess we got to define what there means. But I'd say it takes time for someone other than a family member to actually reach out to you as a result of your content. At least it did for me. And I don't. The thing about my approach, when I start out with stuff, I definitely don't take the most effective and fastest way. I tend to kind of just go in with just dumb brute force and just do things over a long period of time, and then I learn that way. So if you are smarter than me, then you'll not do the brute force and just do things over and over, but instead you'll learn from other people, see what their journeys are, and then apply those lessons. I mean, the main thing is just being consistent, and the way you be consistent with your thought leadership platform, with your stuff, is you enjoy what you're doing. And if you enjoy what you're doing, then it's something that you'll do over and over again. Then you get consistent, and then you get value from it. The thing is, the beauty of the platforms that
I'm going to pause it right there. And, because Jason shares my analytics side, like this is one thing that is really big for me is I've heard that consistency is key. But like consistency has multiple definitions, right? Like one version, it just means make sure you show up and you don't disappear all the time. In other words, like don't take like months at a time where nobody hears from you. It's better to be able to pace yourself and put out posts like a few times a week or something. Most people aren't like me where they're posting every single day for years in a row. But the other definitions of the words consistency has to do with the time of day and the day of the week. Are those things that you guys are willing to comment on? Anything come to mind?
Well, for us, it's not about that piece. For us, it was really, okay, we're going to do the summits twice a year. We do the summits twice a year. We do them in March. We do them in September. And that's the way it'll be in the foreseeable future. When it came to the podcast, those have been a little bit less successful consistency-wise. But when it comes to Marvelous Mondays, that's every Monday. Rain or shine, snow, holidays, birthdays, vacations, because we committed to that. And over time, over 2.5 years, we have been able to build a little tribe of our own, and it's been pretty neat. But it does take time.
And
I
even
love
on
that.
these things, we're consistent doing them every Friday.
Mhm.
Even on Good Friday, we could be out shopping right now, making killer deals, but we're here with everybody.
Right,
With our choppy
exactly.
internet.
It's more about the real estate deals and choppy internet. Exactly. We're making it happen. And you mentioned the Marvelous Mondays. Normally, we don't plug those until quarter after, but I'll have a link on my screen for that. It's a great Zoom meetup where you get to catch up and build your network with additional syndicators and buyers, sellers, operators, all that kind of fun stuff. So it's definitely a great way to get your commercial real estate business going. But let's see what Joe has to say.
that you have, this summit, for example, even if nobody is watching or listening, clearly they are, but even if they aren't, you're getting to ask questions of people who have experience, and you selfishly get to have these conversations with them, and it's just a good way to learn. It's also a good way to maintain or create relationships, and that's the beauty. You always want to identify activities you can do that have multiple benefits. And Tim Ferriss talks about 50-50 goals, or maybe I might have ripped that off from him. I don't know if I adapted it or something, but one of us talks about 50-50 goals. I've modeled so much after I'm like, I can't remember what he originally said and what I took and then applied and did some other stuff with it. But someone came up with 50-50 goals, and 50% is actually achieving the goal, but the other 50% is regardless of if you've achieved the goal, what are the benefits that result from the process that you undertook to get there? And that's the key. So you asked how long does it take to get to a certain level of followers. The real thing to keep in mind is who do you become along the way during that journey, and then as you become a more developed professional and person, you become more attractive to other people, professionally speaking. And when you become more attractive to other people because you know more people to connect the dots with to help others, then you start gaining more of a following, and rightfully so, because you've put in the effort and you put in the work. But it all so there are many components to it: consistency, enjoying what you're doing, and then also being aware of, regardless of if you get, say, 10,000 listeners on your podcast per day or whatever your goal is, regardless if you ever get there, what are some things along the way that I will benefit from for doing this process that I'll be able to take with me and apply towards the business?
Wow, that's
Yeah, awesome. So and of course we've got rising interest rate right now. We've got like all these different things going on. This conversation was near the end of 2020. Do you guys think any of what he said has changed?
Oh, no. And I'm sitting here listening to it, and I'm like,
Right?
man, this is pretty cool, because that's where we are. I mean, people are being attracted to us and wanting to be a part of what we're doing because we've learned so much. And I think that way back when Jason and I were like trying to figure out what our roles were going to be, and I was really excited about a thought leadership platform, I'm glad it was me, because Jason can learn from a book. Jason can learn from a podcast. That's a much harder task and a much harder thing for me.
Mhm.
But, and I'm not anywhere as near as knowledgeable as Jason is, but I've learned so much in the past 2.5 years. I know a lot of people. I know a lot of stuff because I've had the podcast, and I've had the summits, and I've had all these interactions. Because if you think about it, from the summits alone, I've got over 250 hours of basically one-on-one coaching from experts in the space. Who else can say they've got that? And that's just from the summits. That's not from our personal coaching calls. That's not from all the podcasts. That's not from the meetups and who we get to talk to in those meetups. That's just summit content. So Jason and I probably have somewhere around 500 hours of one-on-one coaching from all the stuff that we do. And that's why you do it, not for 10,000 followers or 10,000 listeners, or it's for the stuff that happens because you're doing it.
That's awesome. And Jason, I saw you unmute for a second there. Would you
Yeah,
add?
Angel says that I know more than her, but I think she knows a lot more than me because she does get all that one-on-one coaching from the summit stuff. I'm just in the background listening when I can, but she's asking the intelligent questions.
Yeah, I love that. And like, so we're really talking about personal development at that point. And I think one thing that's super important for people to realize, and it's not common in other industries, which is that if you're talking to somebody who like mentally they haven't done their homework yet, they're not quite there, there's no guarantee that if you meet them again in a month, you could be basically talking to a completely different person. And there's so many directions for personal growth that it's just utterly astounding. It's I think it's so vital to realize that, just to understand like who you're working with and who you're competing against. It's really something that kind of blows my mind. But there you go. Okay, great. So let's continue.
That's really awesome to think of it like that. And it kind of relates back to what John Kasman and I were talking about, because we were talking about just how so many people are doing virtual summits now. There's not the kind of barriers to entry that there used to be for doing summits, especially even for on-site events. And so then you have to turn around and say, okay, what does success look like for me with this?
Yeah, exactly.
Is the success from the number of people you get in the mastermind or being able to have the mastermind? Or does the success come from some other component? And just, it's kind of like what Jeff was talking about earlier today about that perspective flip. And then Trevor even said, it's about the perspective. And so when you look at it that way, it gets a little bit of a different meaning. And so you're always getting something out of every single thing you do.
And I'm a very results oriented person. So I don't want to try to trivialize the importance of quantifiable metrics and results. And by taking this approach, we actually prioritize those results because we're focused on our own improvement, and regardless of the results, we're going to improve. And through that improvement, the results will come as long as we're doing things the right way. So when someone hears this, I'm like, yeah, I hear it, but I really just need the 10,000 downloads or whatever the example is. Well, you're missing the point in that through the improvement, you will get to that point and then some, but you've got to focus on what are some positives that are coming from this. And then how can I leverage those positives, these new skills I'm acquiring, these new relationships that I'm acquiring, to then take it to the next level.
Well, that's yeah, it's I think it comes back down to that idea too of, if you do enough good and you're doing it for the right reason, then the money will follow or the numbers will follow. And then you hear these ultra wealthy people saying, oh, I don't do it for the money. And you're like, well, you already got the money. But so many of them got the money for what they're doing for the good of others. And it's just, you don't think about it that way, because some people are trying to get into multifamily or trying to get into something new, and they simply don't have any money, or they don't have very much extra. And so they're like, no, I need the money today. And it's something I'm really noticing is that when you can take away that financial component, it makes you a totally different player.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a team sport. And what better way to find your team than to scan this code that's on my face, or go to the link that's right there and register for the free meetups every Monday at noon Eastern, where you get to hang out with, about 30 of us anyway, as of this recording. That's pretty normal to get 30 people who are all active and in the space. You guys want to say a couple things about Marvelous Mondays before I take this QR code off my face?
Well, I mean, I just love Marvelous Mondays. I love the people that come. I love our regulars. We're a little family, and it has that family feel to it. And it's a really great place to learn and ask questions, and really to ask questions without the fear of people looking at you funny. Because I think a lot of times, whether it's a classroom setting or not, people are afraid to ask questions because they don't want to look a certain way. They don't want to look ignorant, or they just don't want people looking at them, period. And so it's a really safe place to ask questions, and we really enjoy it, and we'd love to see you there.
That's awesome. Because everybody, that's the one thing we all have in common is we all had to start sometime. And it's really strange as an adult, especially if you've been in your career for a while, to suddenly be like, no, it's not, hey, I'm Fred the engineer, or I'm Fred the whatever, or Jane the this or the that, to now it's like, yeah, I'm a commercial real estate investor, or I'm a commercial real estate syndicator. And the only only way you make that jump is if you hang out with people and you basically take some cues and apply it to your own business. So I think that's really huge. So let's return to Joe.
I agree, and you're right. When rich people say I'm not doing it for the money, people who are not rich say, well, no good. You got the money. You don't need to do it for the money. But the reality is, most of the time, they adhere to. Well, I have on my vision board. I have had on my vision board. Tony Robbins' quote: "The secret to living is giving." Zig Ziglar mentioned service to many leads to greatness, and there's another one: help enough people get what they want, and you'll get everything you want. Those three quotes all in the same family. Give, and you will get. And give a whole lot to a lot of people, and you will get a whole lot in return. And let's talk specifics from a syndication standpoint. When you have the mindset of giving and not in it for the acquisition fees or the ownership in the property or the the notoriety of having the deals done, when you're in it to serve the passive investors and serve the residents at the community, then you come across entirely differently from someone who does not. And that's something that people pick up on. And anyone with any level of emotional intelligence will pick up on that from you for what your true motivations are. And when you're speaking to passive investors on phone calls, it's if you speak about, especially in my early days, when I remember speaking to them about, hey, I just really care about you and your family, and here's an opportunity that I have, and if it makes sense, great. If not, that's fine. Either way, hope you and your family are doing well. That is.
Joe just mentioned that back in his early days, but we're talking about 2020, which I think a lot of people right now would call that his early days. If you guys want to, explain to the audience who Joe is and why, if he's speaking, it's really good to listen.
So I wouldn't call these his early days. When we met Joe in 2017, he had $65 million in assets under management. At the time of this recording, he was right about one billion with 9 zeros. Now he's at 2.6. So he was launching his career, but I would say his $65 million day was his early days, if I had to guess. So that would be about 3 years before this. So
Fair enough. So okay, and then just for people who are new to commercial real estate, you say somebody has $1 billion or $2.4 billion worth of assets under management, but like that doesn't tell you really what somebody does. So I guess you could say that Joe would be a repositioner, KP sponsor, as far as like he's the head at like this big portfolio of assets. Like, how would you describe where he is in the big scheme of things?
So he's the lead sponsor on his team, but he's different from other coaches out there in that he doesn't come in as the KP on student deals except in rare situations.
Mm-hmm. And it has to meet his criteria to invest.
Yeah, so they're actually his deals, and there's other stuff too. Like he's kind of hinting on relationship driven activities versus transactional based activities, and there's a place for all of those things, and you're going to find your people regardless of which direction you choose to take. But one of the reasons why we really enjoy working with Joe is because we're all on the same page. We are relationship driven also. We want to help people and we want to change lives. And the best way to change lives is through that relationship approach. And that's where we come from.
Beautiful. And so the opposite would be like, like a buckshot, like spray and pray, sort of like, okay, let's just have really like superficial relationships with like 10,000 people and then build a business based on that. Whereas relationships based, that's where, you're getting an inner circle where you really know each other like inside and out. It's not just something simple like that. That's a good way of putting it, you figure?
Yeah, I think of it as building a foundation. Like if you have a whole bunch of superficial relationships, you're trying to build like a big tall building on like a 6-inch foundation. Whereas if you are building these relationships, you're concentrating on a deep foundation, might be 50 feet deep. And so you don't even approach the surface until you're 50 feet going, and then it starts building from there. And then what happens is if something happens, your whole building doesn't topple because you have a good foundation.
Great way of putting it. All right, let's continue with Joe Fairless.
So much more effective than I got this deal. Here are the returns. I'm confident in the projections. Are you interested? I mean, it's just completely different, and it's more transactional in nature. And when we treat relationships and correspondence as transactional, you'll get just that. You might get some transactions, but it's not a sustainable approach. A sustainable approach is building long-term relationships, one investor at a time. And you do that by truly caring. I tell you one other thing related to this from a public speaking standpoint. I remember my first presentation I did, one of the first in New York. I decided to teach a class on real estate investing, and it was probably about 6 or 7 people showed up. Most of them were my friends. I think there might have been one stranger, and it was in this upstairs of some church on the Upper West Side in Manhattan that I rented out, just this little cubby hole of a room. And I started to talk. Everyone was seated. I started to talk, and nothing came out. And I was like sweating bullets, and I was terrified and embarrassed because the people who I knew, most of them were my friends, and I worked with some of them with some of them at the time. It was just it was just an embarrassing moment. I got up. There was a sink. I got up, got a drink, sat back down, and it was. I continued, but it was still very rough. And I watched a video shortly after that, Tony Robbins video, and it's presentation skills that Tony Robbins talks about. And one of the skills, or one of the tips that he mentions, is focus on your audience and the value you're going to give them. Focus on how much they need this information and how much of an impact it will create in their life. And by putting the focus on them and not me, and selfishly, am I going to say things the right way, but just forgetting that, focus on them and the content that they need to hear. It's so much easier. It's so much easier for me to get in front of, the best ever conference audience every year and have the keynote and talk to whomever. There's still some nervous energy. I think that's healthy, but focusing on them. And so if you apply that to every component of your business.
I'm just going to pause him there because he mentioned the best ever conference, and Joe was kind enough to be a sponsor for the fall 2022 summit. And do you want to say a few things about the best ever conference? And I've heard you say that it's really the one to go to each year, even though there is at least a half dozen good ones, but it tends to be the one that I hear you guys promote the most. So can you say a couple things about that?
I can absolutely. I know more people at Best Ever than I know anywhere else, and I know a lot of people. But I walked into Best Ever this past year knowing 150 people that I had met virtually that I wanted to meet face to face. And I walked out knowing probably somewhere between 300 and 500. Just because that's the way it works. And I've been to other conferences, and Best Ever is my favorite, partially because I know so many more people there. But at other events, I know people as well, but there's a different energy going on. And I think it boils back down to transactional versus relationship driven, because in relationship driven environments, I have zero issues. I can handle the noise. I can handle the situations. I can read people a little bit better. And when I'm at an event where I still know people, but the energy is different, it's harder. The noises are louder. They're more jagged. The energy is just different. And so you have to be able to adapt to the different energies at the events you go to. But if you're one of those people that really thrives on relationships, Best Ever is going to be an amazing place for you to be.
That's really awesome. So we're coming up at 1/2 the hour, which means it is time for me to put another thing on my face. And I just want to emphasize that the content that we go through every week in the REI Rocks reviews, it's from the summit recordings. We always watch them at 1.5 times speed because I want to show you where the real value is in having access to all this content. And you can see the code on the screen that you can scan with your phone, or you can use the URL that's down at the bottom. So you can check out how to access all of this content and consume it at your leisure. Does anybody want to say another thing or two about the subscription?
Yeah, I can add to it. We just discovered today that some of the lives didn't make it into the library. So guess what? That means there's about around 18 more hours times 6 that we need to make sure hit their library. So that's another, what is that? Another 120 hours? Holy night. People, you're looking at wow, that's over 360 hours of content once we make sure it's all there. Holy crap, holy.
Yep.
That's a lot, my friends.
It really is. It really is. And I really do think that watching at increased speed, it's such a fantastic way to learn. It's especially because, like, that if there's something that you missed, you could still rewind it. But basically half of the fluff there isn't a whole lot of it.
I would add one more thing too. The one more thing is when he talks about, the 50-50 goals, and he doesn't know how much of Tim Ferriss's stuff is originally Tim's or he took it and adapted it. Sitting here listening to Joe, I'm like, oh my God, those are things I say. And I'm sure I picked them up from him. But there's such a part of who Jason and I are that we don't even realize where it came from.
Yeah, there's the sign of a really great educator. It's just where you can really take it along with you. So let's continue. We're reviewing Joe Fairless's presentation from the Fall Summit. Here we go.
Public speaking, and then also speaking with investors. It's going to pay dividends.
Wow. So we've got a bunch of questions now. So Jeff asks, how do you identify new markets?
Probably similar to how you, Jeff, identify new markets. But at this point, we're not. We have set on the markets that we're focused on, which is Dallas, Fort Worth, Tampa, Orlando, and Jacksonville. So there's some components in there. There are some variables that we take a look at. Job diversity. You don't want one employer to make up one industry to make up all the jobs. Population growth, supply and demand, and then also something that gets overlooked a lot is just the total supply or the number of units of product that is available to purchase. I talk to some investors and they might be interested in, say, Fort Lauderdale, but the reality is I think there's not a lot of people that live there. I don't have the exact numbers. There's not a lot of people who live there. Sure, it's close to Miami, but Miami is a different animal, and you're probably not going to find a lot of value add deals there. So look at places where you can also grow. Now it's interesting because with the pandemic, you see people fleeing the urban areas and going to suburban and remote areas. So that changes things a little bit because I believe that's here to stay, because I believe working from home will not be as prevalent as it is now, but it will be more prevalent than it was before the pandemic. It's going to settle somewhere. I don't know if it's in between, but it's going to settle somewhere between, like, I don't know if it's right down the middle, but somewhere in between. And so you're going to have more people living outside of the city center. So that allows you, the investor, to identify tertiary markets that will benefit from the fleeing of those areas. I know 16 just last 4 or 5 months, I think 16,000 people have left New York City to go to remote New England or Florida. New York's supposed to lose or estimated to lose about 2 million people this year. I mean, it's crazy. And they were already leaving previous to the pandemic to go to Florida, but now they're going to Florida, and the people who weren't going to go to Florida and were going to stay in New York, now they're going to remote New England so they can at least stay close to family or whoever else whatever else is keeping them there. So the point is that just really how I evaluate markets isn't as relevant as how I recommend you take a look at markets, because my business is in a different spot from a life cycle than what yours might be. I don't know. Maybe yours is in a similar life cycle. But if I were starting out, I would take a look at those tertiary markets, because the fact is that there's a lot of competition in the markets that we invest in. However, we have a competitive advantage because of the relationships that have been established in our track record and really that relationships and track record. So if I were starting out, I'd take a look at the tertiary markets, knowing that trend most likely will continue for at least the next 5 years, where people leaving the city centers and going to suburbia or remote, rural areas, and seeing where can I identify for good cash flow opportunities. Your exit's not going to be popping like it would in a major metropolitan area, because you're going to have less buyers, but you're going to find some good cash flowing opportunities out there.
Awesome. All right. Another question here. This is from Masha, and she says, "What is the difference between apartment and self-storage syndication? And have you ever syndicated a self-storage?"
Well, I would be speaking about. So the answer to your second question is I have not. I have passively invested, and I am passively invested in a self-storage park, or self-storage community, an RV park. What else? A self-storage RV, mobile home park. I'm in one of those, but I haven't been the lead partner on any of them. I'm just passively investing. So I'm not qualified to answer the first question on the differences, other than obvious stuff which you already know. So I wouldn't be the best person to ask that.
Didn't Taylor did self-storage syndication, didn't he? Load?
I don't know. I don't recall that.
I think I remember seeing it somewhere, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think Masha figured out how. I think Masha figured out how to syndicate self-storage. So she's killing it now. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, Masha. Yeah, right. Yeah, I forgot about it. That's
Angel,
awesome.
you're on mute.
Yeah, when people ask questions about self-storage, I always say, well, why don't you just ask Masha? And people are like, oh my God, Masha's huge. I'm not going to, why would I ask her anything? I'm like, are you kidding me? And I'll text her their questions because they're too afraid to. But we've known Masha since the very beginning, before she'd ever syndicated a self-storage deal. And she is an amazing person. And if you have questions, she's going to answer them. So people shouldn't be afraid to ask these big times in their eyes, you know. Don't be afraid to ask big timers your questions, because everybody starts somewhere. And it's been amazing watching her grow. But yeah, I absolutely remember when she had analysis paralysis, when she was afraid to take the leap. And so it's been really cool to watch her grow and to look back on all of these and see the applicability of them even 2 years later, 3 years later. It doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you're saying there. I do also encourage people in the audience to reach out to the people who you want to work with. Sometimes you're going to run into people who are coaches and they have a paywall where it's like, you know, you need to buy like their ebook first, and then you have to buy like a course or something like that. And then maybe you'll get some one-on-one time. But if they're not coaches and you see them online, you know, in general, they do want to talk to you and find out if you fit in their business or not. And I think people are really good about when they get the bad news and find out, there's no overlap between your business and theirs. They definitely don't criticize you for it. They're not going to be like, ew, what? No, click, right? It's a very, very nice industry and circle of people here. So make sure you do that. Let's do this.
I don't know. Masha, maybe we'll.
You know who'd be good to talk to is Ryan Gibson, Spartan Investment Group. That's who I invested with self-storage, and
Can you pause it real quick?
I feel good about them and their team.
All right, that was exactly what I was saying. So he's telling Masha, you should talk to Ryan Spartan. Masha's probably sitting there going, what? Spartan? I can't talk to them. And now she probably has no issues at all talking to Ryan. So that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, don't let where somebody's at level wise freak you out, because everybody started somewhere, and they're a lot more approachable than you think they are.
That brings me to another part, which is different people are all bringing different pieces to the puzzle. And I think one of the ones that's probably the scariest is if you don't have the financial backing. If you don't have the finances, I think that's scarier than any of the others. But anybody who is really involved in syndication and taking down these deals, they're aware that there's way more that somebody can offer than just money. You know, there are only 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week. And just having people who are conscientious, they'll actually do what they say that they're going to, and like really, really following through. Those are always in demand. And it doesn't matter what level of this game you're at. I think people are still really interested in meeting. You have anything else to add on that? No? Okay, then we'll continue.
No, Taylor said no, he's passive in the same deal as you.
Oh, fair enough.
So I was incorrect, but I remember seeing something about, like, I remember the cool binder that he got from Spartan. So
Yeah. I asked them not to send me binders because I just want everything electronic. So they didn't listen though. I still keep getting binders with new deals I invest in.
all right. Let's see. There is, what else do we have here? Okay. So Omar says, will multifamily real estate ever get a hit because of COVID? In March, there was some properties at a discount because of it, but suddenly nowadays everyone has a great multifamily deal. And what are your thoughts on it?
Well, the eviction moratorium isn't friendly to multifamily, and I do see some softening in certain areas. But man, I wrote an article and I was interviewed on a panel yesterday. I mentioned I wrote an article, why I'm confident multifamily will thrive during and after the next economic correction. And you can Google that article and you can read it. I wrote it in January of 2019. I'm still confident.
Yeah, I'm not sure why the recording went black, but it's not our technical difficulties. It seems to be the feed. So just sorry about that. Bear with us.
In that article and the thought process that we had when we came up with the article, we meaning Theo and I. And what I believe is going to happen is I think that, the eviction moratorium is going to snag some owners, because if you have
I'm going to spot check and make sure it does come back, though, and it's not. You know what? I think it is.
Assuming that it goes away at the end.
If I refresh, then it should come back, and we were at right here. This is how you work on your feet. Beautiful. How about that?
To multifamily, and I do see some softening in certain areas. Well, the eviction moratorium isn't friendly to multifamily, and I do see some softening in certain areas. But man, I just.
So you speeded it up though.
I wrote an article and I was interviewed on a panel yesterday. I mentioned I wrote an article titled why I'm confident multifamily will thrive during and after the next economic correction. And you can Google that article and you can read it. I wrote it in January of 2019. I'm still confident in that article and the thought process that we had when we came up with the article, we meaning Theo and I. And what I believe is going to happen is I think that, the eviction moratorium is going to snag some owners, because if you have a B class property and you don't have a lot of cash reserves, and maybe you inherited the property, you're going to be underwater. You're going to be selling. You're going to be a very motivated seller and a distressed seller. C class properties could be in the same boat, but to a lesser degree, and then B and A less and less, which is ironic because prior to the pandemic, the general thought process was that when a recession hit, white collar jobs get hit first. Therefore, class A is the worst product, and then trickles down to B, then C, then D. But with this pandemic, as we all know, it really hit the service industry and hospitality, and it's actually going from the bottom up.
Can you pause it right there?
I believe that.
I think that this is really applicable today also, because there are plenty of people saying we're not in a recession, we're not in a recession. We are in a recession. I am an economist. We are in a recession. And I think there's a lot of people that just haven't felt it the same way. And part of that is because of what Joe just said. With the way the pandemic hit, it was like a bottom up effect. And it's the same. It's going to be a bottom up. So the reason why I've really seen it is because with our son, with his special needs, we decided to go all organic, and we order our groceries online from a mail delivery program. So whereas when the average person is in the grocery store, they are going to be subconsciously switching between normal and inferior goods. And an inferior good is not a bad. A bad is something you never buy. An inferior good is something that just a little bit less desirable, maybe. Maybe instead of getting, dull fruit, you get generic fruit. Or instead of getting, I don't know, filet mignon, you get hamburger meat. It's instead of, grade A deli meat ham, you're over in the refrigerator section trying to find some Carl Budding. There's just the subconscious things that you don't even realize you're doing. I saw our grocery bill double because all we saw was the price changes. In the program that we use, in the app that we use, you can't select a way to a cheaper good because there's usually only one option, maybe two options. So you can buy less, you can buy something else, or you can not buy at all. But you can't select away to something less expensive because it may not be there. And so I have been experiencing increasing grocery bills for a very long time. And I tell my students all the time, watch your grocery store purchases because you're not going to feel it because it's subconscious. But when you can see it and you can see the trend, it will blow your mind.
Yep, that's some awesome stuff. And those of you in the audience may have noticed that I downloaded the video to see if I could stream based off of that to see if it is a plug-in issue, and it's not. So we're going to be watching a black screen for the next like 8 minutes or something like that. It'll be amazing.
This is for our fellow viewers who are driving right now, so we're not going to distract them.
Right, exactly.
Out there braving the masses on the Black Friday day sales.
Right, exactly. Oh yeah, exactly. Black screen for Black Friday. Here we go.
With that being said, with the eviction moratorium, assuming that it goes away at the end of this year, I think multifamily will continue to thrive. And I've mentioned before, but not during this conversation, the mortgage credit availability index is at the lowest level since March of 2014. And that's basically how much money is out there available to lend to the consumer for a mortgage. So lending.
I think we have to talk about that. So as far as like what exactly happened. So 2020 multifamily was what I've described strong, like strong. 2021, pretty much the same thing. Everybody feeling like, hey, you know, I know what I've got. You know, it was basically a seller's market. And that definitely stopped this spring. As far as like, I'd say that's the latest that it started. But I think Joe, it just goes to show that if you have people who are far enough in the game with enough experience, you know, even in such outrageous times as COVID, you know, they'll still know the major forces and they'll be able to make great predictions. Do you want to say what happened in the last couple years? You're both muted though.
Yeah, I'm sitting here about to answer it. And I'm like, oh, I'm muted. So there's a lot of things going on. I want to go back to something he said pretty early on, where he talked about tertiary markets and population growth, all those things. And in tertiary markets, I think there is less money to be lended at the start because nobody will call it a tertiary. They're like, oh, that's a very small market. Really? Well, my broker said it was a secondary market. No. That's a very small market. No, honey, it's tertiary. And what I'll tell you about tertiary is if you don't have somebody living there that is not just boots on the ground, but is living there and knows what it's like in that market, you're going to have a hard time being successful in tertiary markets, period. And the lending side of it, this is where my expertise, I default to others because I don't always know those pieces of it, but I know how I feel when I'm somewhere and I know what it's like to be there. And I know what it's like to when things come up on a property for us to just be able to drive there and fix it or drive there and be on site while the problem's being fixed. Those are the things that I thrive at. And then Jason takes over the more intricate pieces of like, what's the lending situation look like? What kind of LTC or LTV are we getting? You know, is the bucket dry? Is there nothing left in it? And that's kind of Jason's side of things.
That's really awesome. And that reminds me of a conversation I had with Leah Fox. I think it was like a week ago or something like that. She's out in Georgia and she's not like in Atlanta or one of those major areas. She's about 2 hours away from a lot of the major centers and state lines and whatnot. But that's something that she brought up. There's a lot more virtual investment happening these days. You know, me, I always tell people I'm from the internet, but I'm actually up in Canada, which is not a great place as far as maintaining that local advantage. But the things that Leo was pointing out, you know, like if you're investing from California or something in a place like Georgia or Texas, because you know it's got better job growth, you know the prices are a lot more reasonable. You know, you really have to have somebody who knows it's like, what are the bad neighborhoods? What are the towns you want to stay out of? Because when you're looking at a map, they all look the same. and even if you're checking at the demographics, you're going to, get information that will tell a different tale from the reality.
Well, and that reminds me of a story, or of an experience I had. I'm at an event, and there's a property management company there, and I know the properties they manage. One of them is around the corner from our house. I've been tempted to take pictures and send it to the GP team because I'm like, oh, I don't think they know this is going on. But they're talking about a property in our town. They're like, well, we're at 100% occupancy. And I'm like, wow. There was somebody murdered there like 9 months ago, right? They had no clue.
Well, that's really something, isn't it? It's that local advantage. It just can't be. It can't be.
But we're at
downplayed
100% occupancy. So. Oh, great!
Right. And even there, there's more to it than because there's also like economic vacancy as well, which is where you don't have a 1-year lease, and the banks, especially if you're going for non-recourse loans, that's really important. Like the bank could actually rather have it vacant.
Well, and Jason can probably explain this way better, but it's my understanding too that it's the difference between what you're getting every month and what you could be getting every month. Is that right, Jason?
Yeah, and you never want to believe someone when they say it's 100% occupied, because all that means is it's 100% occupied at that moment. Like over the year, you're never going to get 100% occupied. If you are 100% occupied, you're probably well below market rent, so your loss to lease is great, and so that reduces your economic occupancy. You could be giving concessions or other things, and that really reduces your economic occupancy. So being 100% occupied, yeah, I just don't believe anybody when they say it.
Yep, I love it. And when you want the agency debt from Fannie or Freddie or something like that, the stabilized numbers are generally they want 90 days of at least 90% occupied. And if you don't have the 1-year leases, it doesn't count. So if you've got people who are paying month to month, then that's going to get in the way of your ability to get those agency loans. So it's not intuitive, but it's good to know and keep track of that stuff. But we're going to continue with Joe Fairless in the dark. I don't know if it's like some sort of secret ninja thing or whatever, but it's for Black Friday. It's a special thing. So let's keep listening.
Lending restrictions or lending qualifications have gone up, and it's harder to get loans. You have to have a higher credit score. You can't have as juicy of a loan to value as you might have been able to get before. And guess what? I mean, credit scores for individuals and cash in pockets for individuals who are renting right now looking to buy, their credit scores are not going up, generally speaking, and cash in their pockets and their savings is not going up, generally speaking, right now, because they're unemployed or they just weren't preparing for a pandemic, and rightfully so, not preparing for a pandemic that has never at least happened in my lifetime. So I think multifamilies continue to thrive because the loans hard to get, it's hard to find affordable housing, new construction costs are through the roof, as any contractor knows, and anyone looking or building new properties. And it's money for a down payment is tough to find as well, or a lot of people don't have that saved.
So we've got some questions here coming in on Facebook too. So I'm kind of trying to look through both. So it says, this is from Sandhya. She says, how do you underwrite deals more conservatively now versus pre-COVID, even though there's an uncertain 2021 anticipated?
Yeah, I'm just going to refer you to an article, how to underwrite deals. And that's going to get you what you need for some ideas. It's if you, I can send it to you, Angel, or if you want me to just say it's just if you search underwriting adjustments during COVID, Joe Fairless syndication school, then you'll find it, and we go through it in pretty good detail.
She says, I'm like no rent bumps year one.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to look at that. I understand the example. So it's income and expenses. So with rent increases, it depends on the competition, what the competition is doing right now. I mean, I think it's reasonable to assume you can renovate and increase rent on an apartment building if currently competitors are doing the same thing successfully. I mean, that's a reasonable assumption. Now, certainly, there likely won't be as much demand for those renovations, but it's it's hard to make general statements about do this, don't do this in underwriting, because the reality is every deal is different. Every deal is located in a different pocket of a different submarket. Every deal has slightly different resident base. Every deal has a slightly different pulls from a slightly different pool of employers. We all want, I'm not saying that you're asking for this, but people want sound bites for, hey, do this, do these 3 things, underwriting, boom, you're good. That's not true. It's not reality. You've got to take it on a case-by-case basis based on what the competition is doing, what the market's showing, what type of employment is driving that microeconomy. How has that employment performed? How have those industries performed? What do the third-party research companies say is projected to take place in that area? What is your business plan with the property? Factor all those things in and then make some reasonable assumptions based off of that while being conservative. I will say that with lending requirements now, you're going to have to tuck away a decent chunk of money for lender reserves. So that will be factored in, or that needs to be factored in. And you should be talking to your mortgage broker about that so that you're underwriting correctly. Because if you don't factor that in, that's going to kill your cash on cash return.
Wow.
I can't think of a better time than right now to unmute and start talking about a new code that's on my face. We were just talking about underwriting, and I think there's some mystery as far as like, how does underwriting as a service actually work? What sort of fees are involved? You know, that's got to be going through your mind. And the one that I'd like to emphasize is it's not like you just feed numbers into a computer and then it just spits it out. It's a laborious, time-staking thing, and there's a difference between a 1-hour underwriting job and a 3-hour underwriting job. So who wants to talk about not just this wonderful apparel with the bow ties on the shirts and all that kind of stuff, but who wants to talk about the underwriting services available at theacademypresents.com/UW?
I can talk about it, but I'll have to send you an invoice when I'm done.
Perfect.
No, there's all sorts of things that that can be done. I know a lot of people get a lot of deals handed to them, and so they just want someone who's knowledgeable to just look over and see. A lot of times they don't know what the assumptions are that go into it, and if you look at a big spreadsheet, it can be pretty daunting. So you could have people, me, go through, and I can go through each cell. I don't mind it. I'm fairly efficient at it, so I can get through it pretty quickly. I can get you an answer pretty quickly. That's going through like an existing underwriting that you already have. If you question it or you need more detail, I can also put it into my model, which I created. I've pulled bits and pieces out of lots of people's models, and I created my own. And I have many people who have lots of faith in it, including Joe Fairless has looked at it and was impressed, or his underwriting team was. So we can do that. Or if you don't have anything and you need something underwritten, that's a whole other process where I can take a T12 or rent roll and put it in and spit out some numbers for you. You can give me some key parameters that you need. I can do main assumptions, but a lot of assumptions are market based, so that I don't always know, but I can do a lot of research and figure it out for you. So
That's awesome. And so you mentioned assumptions, and I want to bring that into a hard example. One of them would be like if you're projecting to finish capital expenditures over the course of 2 years, or do you, like maybe pay the additional fees to get a contractor team to execute and complete it sooner? That's an example of an assumption where it's like, you're assuming it's possible. It might be that like all the contractors are all booked up and, it's tough to get people or something like that. Do you think that's a good example of an assumption where, like you got to make these decisions of what does this look like? What does that look like? Does that sound?
yeah, and you also
good?
have to do a lease audit to verify that you can get people out of the units so you can renovate them. Because if someone signed a 3-year lease, not saying it happens a lot, but if someone signed this 3-year lease, you're not going to be able to renovate it until that 3-year lease is up. And so you need to do a lease audit and then verify that you can do it in the time frame that you want.
Yeah. And I'd also say too,
Bingo.
one of the things that happens is you have people that talk about how you can just outsource your underwriting. That's something you can just outsource. And it is something you can outsource, which is on Jason's sliding scale. That's something he can do up front for, less involvement. But things come up while while it's happening, while your deal is going. And so you really want somebody on your team that can help you out in those moments, or somebody that's familiar with your deal. So you could hire somebody like Jason to do your initial, and then he's familiar with your project. So as things come up, and guess what, they will, as things come up, you can come back to him and say, hey, we tweak the underwriting, but here's our current underwriting, and we need to take on this, that, or the other. We're going to look at maybe doing another raise. We're going to look at this big project, and it tweaked the numbers a little bit. Can you look at this again? And that doesn't necessarily change the underwriting, but he can tell you how many years it's going to take you to pay back that decision, or what kind of cash flow you can expect as you're taking on that project. And so I think that when people think underwriting, they think we just need to underwrite it to get the purchase done. But you also need somebody that can look at the current underwriting that you have, and look at the new projects you're trying to take on as prices change, as materials change, as people, your construction guys, your subcontractors, as all of those things change. You still have to be there, and you still have to be able to get into that underwriting and see where it's going to be the most profitable. And that's just another place where you would need someone like Jason to be able to look at your stuff and help you out, because we need those team members. And even if you don't want to hire someone or have someone be a part of the GP that can do that role, you still want somebody like Jason that has an intimacy with the underwriting to help you out with some of those decisions.
Yeah, and I wanted to
That's
say
awesome.
some examples of how your underwriting will change throughout the process. You get a lot of underwriting done, and then you submit an LOI, and you think your underwriting is over. It's like, no, because now you need your debt. What kind of debt are you getting? Guess what? That changes, and so you need to be able to put in and see, hey, will this debt work from this bank, or will this one work from this bank? You have to be able to do that. Do it relatively quickly so that you can get an answer to your lender on what kind of debt you're going to have. And that also affects your capital raise, because you might say, hey, I can only get 60% LTV. Well, this bank over here gives me 60% LTC. What does that mean? How much do I have to raise? And that can drastically affect your deal. And then once you do finalize your debt, you get everything situated. Guess what? Now you have due diligence, and now you have to put in all the CapEx that you were expecting, and how close were you? Because I guarantee you're going to find something else that you didn't even think about. That's going to change your underwriting as well. So you need to be able to implement that afterward. And then supposedly you do close, and you use underwriting up until you close. Like, well, I don't need it anymore. Well, now, after you close, you have a business plan to carry out. Guess what? You have a map. Your underwriting is a map of what you need to do and how you can get there. So now you can compare your business plan to what you projected and see how far off you are. Are you below it? Are you above it? Well, you still need to be able to see it, because if you don't have a roadmap, you're just blindly going in the dark and hoping for the best. So.
And Andrew Rosenberg, I should, for anybody in the audience who doesn't know him, he's a limited partner, which means that he invests, but he is not on the GP team. He's not running the buildings. All he does is he looks at other people's deals and sees if there's room in there. And what he said here is only a local truly knows the market, and brokers or PMs, that's the property managers, there aren't an equivalent. A part of it, of course, is the conflict of interest, which is that like what they want and what an investor would want, they're not totally aligned. They're mostly aligned, and there are laws in place making sure that there's nothing corrupt going on. But
Well, and that goes
I
back
just
to what I was saying earlier about that one around the corner from us.
Mhm.
I should have taken pictures and sent it to the GP team. The GP team didn't know what was going on with the property. I mean, we dumpster dived a bookcase for my daughters. It's amazing. I love it. But it was there by the dumpster. It's a little princess thing. It's super cute. But that shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't have all that stuff by your dumpsters. Does it happen? Yes. But it can't happen frequently. You can't have that much rubbish out there by your dumpsters.
And Andrew also commented on my tie in case y'all didn't see it. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you pulling up the tie. And of course, I guess Andrew hasn't figured out that that's totally your brand. And so it's more shocking if you don't have the tie. After all, what kind of underwriter doesn't even have a bow tie? Like,
I know. I think I went to a meetup yesterday on Thanksgiving, and I just had a T-shirt on, but I put my bow tie on. So.
Oh, okay, good. Right, we've got a reputation to uphold here, but let's see more finishing off with Joe first. Right, consistency.
All right, based on comps. Thank you. All right, so she's saying you're based on what other people are doing. So thank you. So with the mass exodus from city hubs, how do you feel that change in demographics is going to affect like how much you can increase rents in multifamily that's still in those city hubs?
I refer back to my previous answer. I don't have a general catch-all statement for that other than what I said previously. You got to take a look at all the specifics of which property you're talking about and what's driving the employment. How's that employment fared? How does employers fare? Who's currently living at the property? Who do you want to live at the property? What are the comps doing? What's your business plan? How much of a rent bump are you looking to do? Are you first, second, third, fourth, or fifth in the marketplace in terms of rent, post-renovation, all those things?
Wow. So in that move to focusing more on, say, secondary and tertiary markets, is it still a 5 to 7 year turn on, like, to turn the deal to go full cycle?
Depends on what you want to do. Could be 10 years, could be longer. Some apartment investing groups like to hold their properties for the long run, and that works for them. So it just depends.
All right. So if I didn't get to your question, I'm so sorry, but he only had 30 minutes for us. So thank you for addressing all these questions, and thank you for coming on. It was fun to actually ask my own questions at the beginning. You weren't typing fast enough. So
I enjoyed it, and I respect everyone who's listening to this to improve yourself and get better and follow through on your building out your business and helping others along the way. So thank you for that, and thanks for having me on here.
Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and a wonderful weekend, and hopefully you'll get back on and watch some of the other people to support us.
Yes, awesome. See ya.
All right, you have a great day. Thank you again.
Cool. So how cool was that? He's such a nice guy. That was really awesome, I thought.
Well, that's one of the other things that we really love about Joe is that's the way he is. Now I get intimidated sometimes, and so all these people are like, "Oh my God, you can't talk to Masha, you can't talk to Ryan, you can't talk to these people," and I get intimidated too sometimes. I get afraid to ask him questions because, in my mind, I think I know how he's going to hear it, and it seems so trivial that I'm afraid to ask. But he's a great guy, and he's very down to earth, and it's a self-limiting thing on my own part. So, yeah, just out there to everybody listening.
At least you're making the step, right?
Yeah, I mean, just don't think that somebody
you're actually asking the questions. Right. Yeah, that it really is quite something, and I think it's also a testament. Like, one thing I like to go off of, I like to pay attention to whatever like social commentators, pundits and all that kind of stuff are trying to say, and you get it pretty frequently that. Especially on the left, people saying like, "Oh, nobody deserves $1 billion." And of course, just because you have $1 billion in assets under management, that doesn't mean you have a bank account with $1 billion just sitting there, which of course would be the most ridiculous thing like I've ever heard of. Like Warren Buffett literally keeps billions, in the company accounts just in case there's a company that he can buy at a good price. But like in general, it's just nonsense. And I don't like there's so much integrity involved when you get to those points. And if you're just, the stereotypical, bad guy, just taking advantage of people, you're not going to get that far. Like you'll get further than most people, but you're not going to get to the top of the top. And that's my take. But so what's the doggy bag for this week? What are the big takeaways, guys? It's like, don't be intimidated.
Well, I think there's more to it than that too. It's be like, when you're trying to differentiate yourself from the crowd, you need to like really dig into yourself, because when he was first talking about the conversations he was having with people, it wasn't about these numbers. It was about, hey, I care about you, and I care about your family, and I care about y'all's success, and I have an opportunity that could make you be even more successful. Are you open to letting me share that with you? And it's just different. And if you'll notice, one of the things he talks about is about making things better for the residents. I never hear him talk about tenants or renters. I always hear him talk about residents. And I think that's, it's a small thing. It's a semantics kind of thing, but it's so much more than that, because when you have residents, you care about the people. When you have tenants, you care about the paycheck.
And I just want to point out that if you don't have tenants or you don't have residents, you don't have a property that's going to perform. So your residents need to be your top priority, even over your investors. Your investors are going to come in second, but your residents are first. You have happy residents, you'll have happy investors.
Absolutely.
And there you
And then
have
the
it.
GP team is at the very bottom of that ladder. So
yeah,
right. We're not aiming to please the people who are running the joint. I love it. That's funny. So to sign off, though, I'm just going to pull up the Marvelous Mondays code again. Again, that's completely free. You can join us and meet us there, and a bunch of our other syndicator friends. I really hope that you do, because it's a fantastic time. It's a great way to start off your week. And the people who you end up meeting there, they're real players, and this is, your network is your net worth, as they say. And so it's one of the best ways to get a real jump start. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Hopefully we'll see you on Marvelous Mondays. Anybody else have any parting words?
We just want to see you at Marvelous Mondays. It's a great place to be, and it's a lot of fun.
yep. See ya.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. See you again next week. We're here every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and you can check out this fantastic content. And if you want to know more about all of this content and how to access it, just go ahead and message it or comment on here. But have a wonderful rest of your week, everybody.
Bye, guys.
See ya.
Bye.